All right, let's dive into the world of trade wars today, and more specifically, how they can really impact businesses like yours. We've got some interesting sources to work with today. Um, One's from Good Rates Insurance, they're specialists in small business insurance. And the other is a fascinating article all about how businesses can use different risk mitigation strategies when they're faced with tariffs, you know,
Yeah.
those taxes that governments love to slap on imported goods.
Yeah, it really is a complex landscape out there. And,
Yeah.
it's easy to just think trade wars only affect the governments involved. But the reality is that they can ripple through the whole global economy and hit businesses right where it hurts. The bottom line.
Okay, like, let me unpack this a little. So just imagine for a second that you're a business owner. Everything's going fine, and then bam, tariffs hit some key material that you need to import for your business. Maybe you're a construction company that relies on Canadian lumber, or you're a clothing retailer and you source fabrics from overseas. What happens then?
Well, one of the first things you're going to notice is price volatility. Those tariffs can drive up the cost of all your materials, and it becomes way harder to maintain your profit margins. And that's really just the beginning.
Right, because then you've got the potential for disruptions to your entire supply chain. Shipments are delayed, orders get canceled, and suddenly you're having to scramble to find other sources, often at a way higher cost. Now, this is where our source from Good Rates Insurance comes in. They were talking about these supply chain extensions you can get in business interruption policies. What's the deal with those?
So imagine this. A critical shipment, let's say of specialized components,
Yeah.
gets held up because of some new tariff. Your production line comes to a screeching halt. You're losing thousands of dollars each day. It's a nightmare. But with one of these supply chain extensions in your business interruption policy, your insurance could actually help cover those huge losses. It gives you some breathing room to find new suppliers, maybe even reroute those shipments. It's like a safety net, designed specifically for trade-related issues like this.
So it's not just about protecting like your physical assets, it's about protecting your ability to actually keep operating and keep making money, even in a really uncertain trade environment.
Exactly. That's the whole point. And that's honestly just one piece of the puzzle. Smart businesses, the really proactive ones, are taking things a step further. They're looking beyond just insurance to build more resilient supply chains overall.
That makes a lot of sense. So they're not just reacting to the tariffs after the fact. They're getting ahead of the curve. What kind of strategies are we talking about here?
Well, the expert in the article was really highlighting local sourcing. It can make a big difference. Let's say you're a furniture maker.
Yeah.
And you rely on imported wood, maybe a lot of it. Could you try sourcing that timber domestically instead? Not only would that potentially mean you're less exposed to tariffs, but you could end up with shorter shipping times and lower transportation costs as a bonus.
Okay, but what about if you need specialized materials, stuff that's not really available domestically? I'm thinking like high-tech components or certain minerals. You can't just switch to a different supplier overnight for that kind of stuff.
You're absolutely right. That's where supply chain diversification comes in. And it's a lot more nuanced than just having a backup supplier in your back pocket. Think of it as building a sourcing strategy with multiple layers. You could diversify geographically, like get the same material from a bunch of different countries, so you're not relying on just one.
Yeah, yeah.
Or you could even explore completely alternative materials, maybe even invest in some R&D to create your own substitutes.
So it's about having options then, spreading the risk around, not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And what's great about this approach is that not only does it help protect you from trade wars, but it can actually lead to some unexpected benefits too, like discovering new suppliers, maybe ones with better quality or lower prices. It forces businesses to think strategically about their sourcing, which can really pay off in the long run.
That's really interesting. But what about those situations where even diversifying your supply chain just isn't enough? What if you're in a sector that relies on one very specific material and it's only available from one particular country, and that country happens to be in a trade war? What do you do then?
That is a tough spot to be in, and that's when things can get really complicated. The article actually gave this fascinating example about home builders in Canada. They were dealing with U.S. tariffs on lumber, and they ended up coming together to seek government support and investment in domestic timber production.
So instead of just accepting the higher cost, they tried to find a longer-term solution by working together to boost supply at home.
Exactly. It was a really proactive approach, and it really shows how important it can be to engage with industry associations or government agencies and even competitors to try and find a workable solution. And even though this particular example focuses on Canada, these principles really apply globally.
So even in our globalized economy, where things are supposed to flow freely across borders, there's still a role for strategic government intervention, especially when it comes to protecting key industries and supporting domestic production.
Absolutely. But we can't forget about the individual businesses, the ones on the front lines of these trade wars. They need tools and strategies to protect themselves. And like we saw with good rates, one of those tools is definitely insurance.
Right. And we were talking about supply chain extensions earlier. But Good Rates also mentioned that they work with a ton of different kinds of businesses, from commercial auto to manufacturers. Does that mean there are other types of insurance policies that could be helpful in a trade war?
That's a great question, and it's one we should definitely explore in more detail. The important thing to remember is that insurance isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. You need to understand your own specific vulnerabilities and find the coverage that's best suited to mitigating those risks.
Okay, so before we go any deeper into insurance, let's take a second to recap what we've learned so far. Trade wars can have a really big impact on businesses, but with some proactive strategies, like diversifying your supply chain or exploring local sourcing, you can build resilience and maybe even find new opportunities.
And don't forget, staying informed is absolutely key. Don't wait until a crisis hits. Understand how tariffs could potentially impact the materials you need for your business, and start thinking about your mitigation strategies now, before it's too late.
So we were just talking about the different types of insurance and how you need to find the right coverage for your business. Now, Good Rates mentioned something called a tariff pass-through clause. What does that mean in real life? Like, how does it actually work?
It's basically a way to protect suppliers when things are uncertain. Like when trade is volatile, imagine a new tariff gets put on steel imports, and suddenly your supplier's costs go through the roof. Instead of them having to just eat that cost increase, a tariff pass-through clause lets them pass on some, or even all of that extra cost to you, the buyer.
So it kind of shifts the burden of the tariff. But wouldn't that mean that my profit margins would take a hit?
It could, yeah, potentially. But it also means you get a more transparent and predictable pricing structure. You as the buyer know upfront that the price is going to change if tariffs do. It encourages good communication and collaboration between suppliers and buyers, which is so important when you're dealing with trade wars.
Right. Yeah, it's better to have that open communication than to be blindsided by price hikes out of nowhere. But what if I just can't afford to absorb that extra cost? What options do I have?
That's when things get interesting. It forces you to get creative. Maybe you need to revisit your pricing strategy, look for ways to make your production process more efficient, or even think about using different materials.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Exactly.
Well,
We see this all the time. Businesses are faced with a challenge. They adapt, they innovate,
yeah.
and they come out stronger on the other side. Trade wars, as disruptive as they can sometimes actually be a catalyst for innovation. They can push entire industries forward.
That is a fascinating way to think about it. It's not just about weathering the storm, it's about finding the opportunities within the chaos. But let's be real for a second. Trade wars have downsides too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
They create uncertainty. They disrupt those established ways that trade has been flowing. And they can definitely lead to higher prices for consumers, like those lumber tariffs we were talking about. They ended up rippling through the whole construction industry and pushed up the cost of housing.
So there are winners and losers. It's complicated, but we're trying to give you, the listener, the knowledge to make smart decisions for your business.
Exactly. And one of the most important tools you have is critical thinking. Don't just take the headlines at face value. You got to dig deeper. Analyze the situation. Consider different points of view.
And that's what we're trying to do here. We're looking at two very different sources, an insurance website and a business article, and we're putting them together to create a more complete understanding of this whole trade war thing.
And that's what you should be doing too. Don't limit yourself to just one source of info. Find different viewpoints, talk to experts, do your own research. Knowledge is power.
That's a powerful message. And it gets back to the core idea of this whole deep dive. We want to give you the knowledge and the strategies to navigate the choppy waters of trade wars.
We've covered a lot, from understanding how tariffs can impact your supply chain, to looking at things like diversification and local sourcing.
We even talked about how insurance, especially policies with those supply chain extensions and tariff pass-through clauses, can play a role in protecting your business.
But let's switch gears a bit and talk about something that's just as important as any of those strategies: collaboration.
Collaboration, what do you mean by that?
Think back to that example with the Canadian home builders. They realized they couldn't fix the lumber tariff issue on their own. They had to work together. They worked with the government, industry associations, even their competitors to find a solution. That's the power of collaboration.
So it's not just about protecting your own business. It's about working together to make the whole industry stronger.
Exactly. It's easy to fall into that us versus them mentality with trade wars. But sometimes the best solutions come from finding common ground and working together.
You're right. And that applies to more than just lobbying for government help. Imagine businesses in the same industry sharing info about different suppliers, or even exploring joint purchasing agreements to get better deals, or pooling their resources to invest in R&D for new materials or technologies.
Exactly. Collaboration can take so many different forms. And when you're facing a trade war, it can be the difference between just surviving and actually thriving.
That's making a lot of sense. But I am curious, what role does an insurance company like Goodrates play in all of this collaboration?
That's a great question. You have to remember that insurance companies like Goodrates, they have a real stake in their clients' success. They're not just selling policies, they're offering expertise and guidance to help businesses manage risk effectively.
So they're more like partners than just vendors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A good insurance broker. They can be an amazing resource. They can connect you with industry networks, give you insights on best practices, even help you connect with other businesses that are dealing with the same challenges you are.
So it's about making the most of those relationships, tapping into that shared knowledge.
Absolutely. And that's what I encourage you to do. Don't try to go it alone. Talk to your suppliers.
Yeah.
Talk to other people in your industry. Talk to your insurance broker. You never know what kind of innovative solution you might come up with when you start sharing information and working together.
This has been really insightful. We've covered so much ground, from the complexities of tariffs and supply chain disruptions to proactive strategies like diversification and collaboration.
We talked about how insurance can help protect your business too.
But let's shift gears again and talk about something that's just as crucial as any of these strategies we've been discussing.
All right, I'm all ears.
It's preparation.
Ah, yes, preparation. That's a good one.
It's all about moving from a reactive mindset to a proactive one. Instead of waiting for those tariffs to hit and then scrambling to figure out what to do, what if you already had a plan?
Exactly. Maybe you've already found some backup suppliers, or explored local sourcing options, or even negotiated some more flexible contracts with your existing suppliers.
So preparation is key. But how do you even anticipate these trade wars? They seem to come out of nowhere.
That's true. They can be unpredictable. But there are tools out there and resources that can help you stay informed. Like a lot of industry associations put out updates on trade policy changes and potential disruptions. And government agencies publish all sorts of reports and analyses
Right.
on trade trends and potential risks.
So do your research, stay informed, keep an eye on what's happening globally, because it could impact your industry.
Precisely. And don't underestimate the power of networking. Go to industry conferences, connect with other people in your field, even talk to your competitors. You might be surprised by what you learn.
That's a good point. It goes back to that whole collaboration thing. Sometimes your competitors can be your best allies.
Absolutely. And remember, even in the middle of a trade war, there can be opportunities for growth. Businesses that can adapt quickly, find creative solutions, maybe even completely change their business model. Those are the ones that come out on top.
This has been such a great deep dive. We've learned so much about trade wars and their impact on businesses.
We've talked about ways to survive and ways to thrive in this global economy.
And we did it all by combining information from two very different sources, an insurance website and a business article. It just goes to show you that bringing different perspectives together can really help you understand these complicated issues. So as we wrap things up, what are the key takeaways for our listeners? What can they do right now to get their businesses ready for potential trade wars?
Well, first, you have to accept that trade wars are a reality. They're part of doing business in a globalized economy. Ignoring them won't make them go away.
Okay, so acknowledge the threat. What's next?
Be proactive. Don't wait until there's a crisis to start thinking about your strategy.
So stay informed. Analyze your vulnerabilities. Start looking at your options.
Exactly. And remember, knowledge is power. Use all the resources you have available. Industry associations, government agencies, online research, whatever you need to do to really understand the trade landscape and the potential risks.
Okay, so acknowledge the threat. Be proactive. Do your research. What else?
Collaborate. Talk to your suppliers. Talk to your peers, even your competitors. Sharing information and working together can lead to some really innovative solutions.
Don't go it alone. All right, so that's 4 things. What's the last one?
Don't panic. Trade wars are disruptive. That's true. But they can also be a chance to innovate and grow if you have the right knowledge, the right strategy, and the right mindset. you can come out of this stronger than ever.
That's a great way to put it. This has been a really empowering conversation.
It has.
We've talked about the risks, but we've also found a lot of opportunities for businesses that are willing to adapt and innovate. Remember, knowledge is power, and we're here to help you stay informed and ahead of the curve. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep. That's a really good way to think about it. Like, trade wars are just another thing you got to plan for, like a natural disaster or something. It really shows how important it is to actually have a strategy instead of just reacting when something happens.
Exactly. It's about being proactive instead of reactive. So instead of waiting for tariffs to hit and then trying to figure out what to do, what if you already had a plan?
Right. Like maybe you've already found some other suppliers you could use, or looked into getting your materials locally, or maybe you've even negotiated some flexible contracts with your current suppliers, so you're covered no matter what.
That's the idea.
So yeah, preparation is key. But how can businesses even know what's coming? Like, trade wars can seem so random.
It's true. They can pop up out of nowhere. But there are definitely ways to stay informed. Like, a lot of industry associations will give you updates on trade policies and warn you about potential disruptions. And then you've got government agencies. They publish a ton of reports and analyses on trade trends and risks.
Okay, so you're saying do your research, stay in the loop, pay attention to the global situation because it could affect your business.
Exactly. And don't forget about networking.
Oh, yeah.
Go to conferences. Talk to your peers. Heck, even talk to your competitors. You never know what kind of insights you might get.
That's a good point. It all comes back to collaboration.
It does.
Sometimes those competitors can be your best resource.
Absolutely. And remember, even when things are tough, like when there's a trade war going on, there's still opportunities out there. Businesses that are able to adapt, find creative solutions, maybe even completely change their business model. Those are the ones that will thrive.
That's a great point. I think this deep dive has been really insightful.
It has.
We've explored all the ins and outs of trade wars.
Oh, yes.
And how they can impact businesses. And most importantly, we've talked about ways to not just survive, but to really come out on top.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. And we did it all by combining information from two very different sources, an insurance website and a business article.
It's all about looking at things from different angles.
It is. So to wrap things up, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners? What can they do right now to prepare for trade wars?
Okay, so first of all, you have to accept that trade wars are a thing. They're part of the global economy. You can't just ignore them and hope they go away.
All right, so acknowledge the threat.
Exactly.
What else?
Be proactive. Don't wait for something to happen. Start planning your strategy now.
So stay informed, know your weaknesses, and start thinking about your options.
Right. That's two things. The next one is knowledge.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly. Use every resource you have to learn as much as you can about trade and the potential risks.
Okay, so that's 3.
And then don't forget to collaborate.
Oh, yeah. Collaboration is key.
It is. Talk to your suppliers, your industry peers, even your competitors.
Share information. Work together.
You might be surprised what you come up with.
Okay, so acknowledge the threat, be proactive, do your research, and collaborate. That's 4 things. What's the 5th?
Don't panic.
Oh, right.
Trade wars are disruptive, but they can also be a catalyst for innovation and growth. If you have the right mindset, you can use them to your advantage.
That's a great message to end on. So to all our listeners out there, remember, knowledge is power. Stay informed and be prepared. And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.